Here's a little background. I'm a female, and this occurred 2 years ago when I was 18. It took place in Maine. Every summer, my family and I go camp in Ellsworth, Maine. It's about a 3-hour drive from my house. The camp itself is about an hour from the nearest town. I've been going to this camp my entire life. My family owns it, and I've never had an incident like this happen before. I was watching TV in the middle of the night. Both of my brothers and my parents had gone to bed. I heard a noise coming from the kitchen and realized the dogs needed to go outside to do their business. So I took my brother's 2 pit bulls and my Affenpinscher, a tiny dog, outside. After turning on the porch light, I walked around to the front yard and I let the dogs off the leash. It's so incredibly dark in the woods in Maine that the porch light really only illuminated the porch and nothing else, so I tried to keep my eye on them. I was momentarily distracted when I saw a loon, a wild bird, on the lake. When I looked back, I saw that the pit bulls were both looking at something in the woods. I couldn't see what it was, but I assumed they'd seen a squirrel or a raccoon. It was then that I realized I didn't see Alfie anywhere. She's an awfully small dog, and she's completely black. I called for her a few times and heard some soft whimpering right where the dogs had been looking earlier. I took a couple steps in that direction and called for her again, worried that she may have gotten her paw stuck between the rocks or stuck in a snake hole. Suddenly, I felt something moving behind me. I whipped around and looked down. It was Alfie. She had been staying close to me the whole time. I just hadn't seen her. So naturally, I was thinking, if Alfie is here, what the fuck is in the woods? I took another step forward, and the pit bulls began to growl. They were slowly advancing, and were now on either side of me, looking right into the blackness of the woods. I quickly picked up Alfie and began to back up very slowly. I'm not sure what I thought was there, but there are lots of animals in Maine, and I figured the dogs knew better than I did. Since I couldn't see anything, right as I turned around, I heard the most absolutely bone-chilling thing I've ever heard in my life. Coming from the direction of the woods, I heard something or someone call Alfie's name. It sounded almost as if it were trying to mimic me, but it was just all wrong. The voice sounded really distorted, and it almost seemed to wail. I freaked the fuck out and ran inside with the dogs. I have no idea what was out there in the woods. My camp is essentially a log cabin overlooking a lake, and our nearest neighbor, who's also family, lives at least half a mile in the opposite direction of where the thing was. What do you guys think? I was staying the night at my aunt's house visiting my sister. At the time, we barely saw each other and spent little time we had together. I felt out of place around the native side of my family, but my sister was always there to tie me into them. However, this particular night would bring us all together, regardless of blood. It was the start of the summer. I remember it was about a month before my birthday. I was about to turn 10. Even at a young age, most people know of the skinwalker. Most of the time you hear about the monsters of the reservation because your parents or elders want you to behave or they'll come for you. But the skinwalker holds a special place. Most people do believe it is real. Having spent the day on the res with my native family and friends, the day was coming to an end, so we decided to run home before it got too dark. Just before we reached my aunt's house, a Bureau of Indian Affairs officer pulls up next to my sister and I. In a very concerned voice, he asks us where our house was and if we needed a ride. We pointed just up ahead, and he told us to hurry and stay inside. We were a bit confused, but didn't question his orders. We began a full sprint back home. As we approached the house, my aunt was at the door frantically telling us to come inside. Once we were inside, she led us to the basement. The basement wasn't particularly scary, but on this night it was. The windows were covered by planks of wood and blankets. A corner of the room had a mattress on the floor where the family had gathered, huddled. At this point, I heard from upstairs that someone was knocking on the door. It was an officer. My aunt and him were speaking. I couldn't hear much of it, but they both sounded worried. None of us really knew what was going on, but one of my cousins did. He was the oldest of us, besides my aunt. He told us with one word: Skinwalker. I did expect him to say something like that to freak us out, but he didn't laugh. He didn't do anything. He was serious. I became quite frightened now. We all know of the skinwalkers. It was at this time we began hearing sirens from cop cars shrieking all over the reservation. It seemed to go on all night, but I eventually fell asleep. The next day the search was called off and stories abound. The police report mentions of a creature that was spotted near the reservation. Upon investigating, the creature fled and the police gave chase. The characteristics of the creature, to which I remained very skeptical, were that it ran on all fours at incredible speed, sometimes on its elbows and knees, fleshy, like skin inside out, somewhat like an animal, but very human. An officer did take a shot at it, and it hit its mark, but it didn't take the creature down. Afterwards, they lost the creature in the night. A few days later, an older man was found dead in his home from a gunshot wound. Now that last part, I don't know if I believe, but that's how the story goes. However, I do believe they found something. To take those measures to ensure safety is not normal of them. They did find something out there. I have an experience that I would like to share. This happened when I was 14 years old. I'm now 29. This is an experience that I've only shared with a small number of people, and now I'm writing it down for the very first time. My brother, who is a hardened soldier, is still scared about what happened to us that particular evening. Now, on with the story. As a teenager, I would visit my grandma at her home on the Navajo reservation for several weeks every summer. I loved to spend time with her, eat her delicious fried bread, and hear her tell us stories. Every so often, my grandma would hire a worker, the harmless town drunk, to do odd jobs around her house and property. One evening, right before the sun went down, I was asked by my grandma to take him home, which was about 4 miles out of the valley where she lived. I was more than happy to do it, seeing I was only 14 years old, and being asked to drive a truck was pretty awesome. Mind you, on the reservation, no one cares that you're only 14 and driving around. Hell, there's hardly anybody to see you doing it anyways. So my 9-year-old brother jumped in the truck cab with me, while this worker and my dog shared the tailgate of the truck. We were off. After I dropped the worker off at the shack that he and his brothers called a house, we headed back down to the road to Grandma's. As I mentioned before, it was evening and the sky was a deep red as the sun began to set behind us. We were leaving a nice dust trail from the dirt road, and the radio was playing music from the only station that could be picked up from the nearest town. There was nothing unusual, nothing weird. It was at this time that my eye caught movement of something in the bushes a little up the road to the right of us. I remember slowing down, thinking that it was one of the many free-roaming sheep in the area that would dart out in front of the truck. As I passed where I thought I saw it, I sped up, thinking nothing else of it. Then out of nowhere, I just felt this dark feeling of fear and dread. I had no idea why I was feeling this way, but I definitely felt that something was wrong. As I play this memory back in my mind, there were only a few clear moments that I have of that evening. I clearly remember looking in my rearview mirror and seeing the dark silhouette of something very tall and very skinny that seemed to be covered with some kind of fur running behind the truck after us. Whatever it wasn't a normal human, or even human at all. I remember hearing my brother crying and the dog barking ferociously at whatever was chasing us. I remember speeding very fast and shaking violently as the truck bounced on the washboard dirt road. I distinctively remember that this thing was only getting closer as my brother cried, "It's coming up on your side." I remember being scared as hell and thinking that I didn't want to die. At the moment, I thought that would be our last. I remember speeding around a bend in the road and seeing a car coming towards us in the opposite direction. At that moment, I felt instant relief and felt that whatever was following us was gone. Shaken up, but alive, we made it to Grandma's house wondering what the hell just happened. We ran inside, not looking back, hoping that whatever was chasing us had not followed us home. As we told my grandma about our experience, she didn't seem too surprised, which surprised us. She continued by repeating stories that we had already heard at one point or another about black magic, witches, and something the Navajos call naaldlooshii, or skinwalkers. Needless to say, I didn't even want to look out any of the windows all the rest of the night. As a matter of fact, I never drove on the reservation at night again until I was about 21 years old. Without going too deep into explanation, I'll just say that these skinwalkers are evil men and spirits that use black magic for evil doing. I tell you that as far-fetched as it may sound, they are real. I believe that if God and His greatness are real, the devil is equally as real, and also has ways of showing himself. This may not sound scary to some readers, and that may be due to my lack of writing skills, but what happened that evening really did happen, and scared the living crap out of me. I invite anybody to visit this part of Arizona if you have any doubt or want a huge scare. I promise you, you won't be disappointed. I grew up in a small town on the Gulf of Mexico. Our neighborhood was next to a huge field. On the other side of the field, the Gulf itself. Not extremely relevant, just for a setting. My childhood home was laid out where my bedroom and my parents' bedroom were on opposite sides of the living room, which is where the front door was. I normally stayed up late, much later than my parents. They didn't mind much, as I didn't get into much trouble just playing video games all night. I had fallen asleep playing Super Mario RPG, mid-battle and all, when I woke up to my dad calling me into the living room. So I got up, walked out of my room. Every light in the house was off. I called out, "Dad?" He called me again from the living room. I don't recall the exact verbiage used, but he called me by name and was calling me to him. The living room was completely empty, with not a single light on. I stood there, my eyes peering around the room, which was dimly lit from a nearby streetlight seeping through those blinds. "Dad?" Again, he called out to me. This time, though, his voice came from beyond the front door. In retrospect, of course, something was wrong, but as a young boy, being called to in the middle of the night by their father's voice, the first thing I thought was that he obviously needed my help for some reason. I approached the front door slowly, very slowly, partially out of confusion, partially out of grogginess. As I approached, my dad called to me again, then again, and again. Each call beckoned in a friendly but urgent tone. I was within reach of the doorknob, and I stood there. At this point, I felt something was a little off. Maybe I was sleepwalking or caught in some vapor of sleep or something. I paused for a few seconds to really drink in my surroundings, feel my environment. This gave me time to truly take in the details. I was perceptive. I was awake. There was no mistaking it. "Dad?" Silence. "Dad." Then I heard him once more, stern this time, like he was when I was in trouble. "Get out here, now." Oh shit, it's serious, I think to myself. I reach for the door. "What are you doing?" It was my mother, right behind me. Her voice, in contrast to everything I was feeling at that moment, fucking terrified me. It was the most startled I had been in my life, but that record wouldn't last long. "Dad's outside, calling me. I think he needs me," was my reply to her inquiry. "Dad's in the bedroom asleep. Were you dreaming it?" This phrase is one of my most vivid memories. Just thinking about it has me covered in chills. Record shattered. This was by far the most terrifying single moment in my life. No, I know for a fact I wasn't dreaming. I don't sleepwalk. I remember waking up. I remember it very clearly, because I had fallen asleep during a battle in Super Mario RPG, and when I woke back up, Mallow was the only person left standing in my party. And then, right after that was when I first heard something luring me outside. Maybe that's what woke me up in the first place. The act of fear didn't last long, surprisingly. I had no idea what could have been out there. The thought of what it could have been depressed me. I had no response to the bombshell my mother had just dropped on me. I was emotionally exhausted by fear. You know, that sickly, exhausted feeling you get when you receive absolutely terrible news. I simply muttered good night to her, shuffled back to my room, and laid there on the floor until I passed out from emotional exhaustion. I've never encountered anything like this since then. This just seems like the place to share this story without instantly being told that I was just sleepwalking, given that I have not one other single instance of known sleepwalking. And this turned out to be longer than I expected, and I feel very mixed at having immortalized these words. Essentially, part of me feels good to share it to a receptive audience, but the other part of me feels like I'm just stirring some shit. And again, this is 100% factual. I didn't enhance any details. I've told this story for 20 years now, the exact same way. It's one of the clearest memories I have from my childhood. I of course don't know if it was a skinwalker. I have no idea what the fuck it was. All I know is that it was something, and it almost tricked me. I was spending a month with my cousins at my grandma's house. It was August, and my cousins' ages ranged from 10 to 15, and I was the oldest, being 15. I was staying with a 10, 13, and 14-year-old. We stayed up telling scary stories often, but one night, a few weeks in, we decided to make a campfire out back. My grandma's house is in a rural suburb. The neighbors aren't too far when you're driving down the road to her house, but in the backyard, it's thick forest with man-made paths through it. Each house is on a hill, so only part of the basement was actually underground. That isn't important until later, though. We were towards the east side of her yard in a smallish patch of open land. You couldn't see the neighboring yards from there, and there was probably 3/4 mile to each side of us that belonged to my grandma. It was maybe 11 at night, and we were playing truth or dare after telling scary stories, and my 14-year-old cousin dared me and the 13-year-old to go walk through the paths for 10 minutes or so. I said yes right away, as I wasn't easily scared and rather level-headed, but my younger cousin was a bit more hesitant. We didn't bring a flashlight because it wasn't pitch dark yet and we could see enough to not die. We were walking through the paths for about 5 minutes and could barely see the fire through the trees when we decided to turn. In the middle of the path was a large, dog-like creature hunched over with its front hands an inch from the ground. What I remember most was how its eyes were so fucking bright white, and it was a humanoid dog shaped with a human-like head but a dog-like body but human hands and feet. It looked right at us, and I know I was paralyzed with fear as it dashed away the opposite side from us, towards a creek that ran through the yard. Eventually my cousin and I screamed bloody effing murder, and the other cousins and my grandma ran to us. I don't remember much here because I was really disoriented and I couldn't think properly. But I did wake up in bed, so I assumed that I got brought to the house. All the kids slept in the basement in a big room with a sliding glass door to the outside. As the room was on the side that wasn't underground, my bed was pressed against a big glass window, and I could see my cousins playing outside down below. The house is in Michigan, so it gets slightly chilly even in the end of August, and there was a slight breeze, so I put on a jacket and ran to join them outside, skipping breakfast, not wanting to miss out on anything fun. When I got down, I could tell they weren't playing but rather running to get my grandma. Her dogs, both of them, were dead, ripped up. That night we went to bed early. I woke up at maybe 2 a.m. because I felt something hit my head. My cousins were all sitting in the double bed opposite me on the other side of the room. There was one bunk bed and 2 double beds. The double beds for me and my 14-year-old cousin. They were being quiet and staring at me. The 13-year-old nodded his head towards the window. I froze. They all looked afraid. I turned my head slightly to the side and I saw a really messed up looking face pressed to the window with gaping eyes looking down at me. I screamed so fucking loud, it bolted. My grandma called the police after I told her what happened and they found nothing. I went home after that, and I have never been there during the night again. Hey everybody, thanks for listening, and I hope you enjoyed these stories. If you did, please like and share this video and be sure to subscribe to the channel for future scary stories. If you do want to hear some more stories, you can click the annotations to check out some of my other videos too. And whether you like true stories, creepypastas, or urban legends, there's something there for everybody. And don't forget, I'll see you at the witching hour.